Welcome back, and today we're going to continue on what we finished in the last video, which is going to be putting dimensions on this drawing. So make sure that you watch the last video to show how we constructed that, and let's go ahead and get started. So it is so important that once you finish constructing this that you save it. Inventor will let you add it into a drawing, but it's going to ask you to save it first, so I like to go ahead and get that step out of the way. So as you can see that I went ahead and saved mine as exercise 2. Make sure you know what path that you saved it in. Okay, so next let's go ahead and open a drawing. So I'm going to click the new icon button. And remember in this dialog box where you put your standard template, where your standard title block is located at. You have all of these options of where you can save that standard template, but I saved mine right under the English US. So I'm going to click on this standard IDW part file. Once I hit the create button, it should start creating that. Okay, and once that opens, the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to determine what size I'm going to put it on. So I want to put it on a B size drawing. So I'll select sheet, right click, go to edit sheet, and then I'm going to change it to B size. Select OK. And then the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and delete these two title blocks and border. So I'll select this one, hold down the control button and select the other, do a right click and delete. Now let's go ahead and insert in our title block in our border. So under drawing resources, select border, and you can see that I created one called B size. So if I double click it on the icon, it should insert into your drawing. And I'll do the same thing underneath the title block. So I made a title block called title. Go ahead and double click the icon. It should bring up our prompt entries, but I'm just going to select OK. Next thing I need to do is go ahead and bring in that model that I created. So I'm going to select base. And once the dialog box appears, you should get the front view. So remember how we constructed this. We made this our front view. So I'll go ahead and place this here. I'll get the top view and a right side view, and then I'll put an isometric up in the corner. And all I'm doing is just doing a simple left click to bring in those other views. You can move these views around, so if I wanted to move this one over, I can. Wait till I get the little icon and move it over, and you'll see that these will adjust and center themselves accordingly. So once I have this done the way that I'm satisfied, or I can move them afterwards, go ahead and select OK. And you can see Inventor knocks that out really quick for us. We even have our hidden lines and things of that nature. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and put these center marks on my circles. So underneath the annotations, I'll select that tab. And then I can have my center marks. So select center marks. I'll select that circle. And even the circle on the inside just to give me those 2 points. Select the big circle on the outside and then the small one to give me that one. And on these other ones I have center lines going through them. So I'll change this to center lines. And you got two different options here. I can use the bisecting, or I can use one that I kind of create the edge and I can draw it myself. So I'll show you what both of those does. Let's start with the bisecting one first. So I'll go to bisect. And then the two lines, since these two hidden lines completely go across, I'll select this line and try to stay away from the midpoint because it will take that as an actual point. So select that line, and you should get your center mark, your center line to go through it. And I'll do the same thing with here. So I'll select that hidden line and that one. Coming down to this view, I have a few different things going on, so you kind of have to weed through some of this stuff and kind of eyeball where you are. So I can see that the bottom of this circle is located here, which is that line here. So I'll select this hidden line and then that one. And then that'll put my circle center line right in the middle. And with this one, I'll go ahead and show you the other option of creating that with the center line command. So let's select the center line. I can select this midpoint. And then I can come over this direction and I'll select this line And you can see that it did go crooked because I did not select the midpoint. In this case, it might be easier to go ahead and select the bisecting one. Okay, so I'll go ahead and show you that one in another video later. Let's go ahead and escape. And then this one is one of those rare cases where I do have to go ahead and use the bisecting one. Select that line and that hidden line. Okay, so all of your center marks are located on your drawing. Next, let's go ahead and start dimensioning. So some are our common dimensions that we're going to have, and it's always proper, if you can, to put your circle dimensions on where you can see the actual circles. So let's go to dimension. I'll select this one, and you can see that this gives me a radius, which is what I want, and I'll go ahead and place that dimension. Now you notice that we drew these in millimeters, and this is reading in inches. So if you want to go ahead and change that, let's go ahead and take a look at our style so we can set that up to the correct thing. One other way you can do this is, if I go to dimension and I select it from here, I can select the millimeters, and now once I place my dimensions, it will give me the correct one. And as long as I keep creating dimensions, it will keep putting them in millimeters, but the minute I hit the escape button, I'm going to have to come back and I'll change that icon again. Also remember, if you're getting the one that every time you put a dimension on, you're getting a dialog box to appear, I'll double click on this dimension and I'll show you what I have turned off. So when I double click on this one, you can see that I have the edit dimension when created turned off. This just speeds things up for me as I'm placing dimensions on. Okay, so you have those two options that I wanted to show you, but let's go ahead and edit one of these and go ahead and make it our one that we want like we did before. So I'm going to select the Manage tab, then I'll go to the Style Editor. You're going to have to give it a second and the Style Editor should appear. Once your dialog box appears, make sure you select the standard because that's the one that everything is using right now. And then we're going to select Default Standards. Next thing I'm going to do is go to Object Defaults. And what I like to do is select the layers. Then I'll select it one more time just so I can put all of my dimensions grouped in one area. I'll select the edit icon here. And now all these ones that have the dimensions on them, I'll go ahead and change the defaults to them. So my baseline dimensions, I want that to be on the default millimeter. I'll keep going down to the chain one. I'll change the diameter dimension, the linear, the ordinate dimensions, which we're not going to use on this drawing, but I can go ahead and change them. Okay, and I'll leave the angle one is the only one that I'll leave differently because an angle is measured in degrees, so there's no reason to change it to millimeters. Okay, so I don't want to hit the Save and Close button because I don't want to have to open this all up again, but I am going to hit the Save button here at the top. That's going to lock it in, and then I'll go to the dimensions, expand this icon, then I'll select the default millimeter ANSI. I'll select the Display tab. Let's go back to the Units tab first. And underneath Precision, let's go ahead and make those whole numbers. So we're going to suppress the trailing ones. If I don't want to do that, let's go ahead and put this at 2 decimal places because we do have a radius that shows 2 decimal places. And a much more efficient way of doing that is telling it to display the trailing zeros. I'm going to uncheck both of these boxes. So I don't want that trailing zero to show up. And I think that's all I need to change on this box. Let's go ahead and save and close. And now you see that this one automatically updated. And remember that this one is on a different style. So I'll go back to the Annotate tab. Let's go ahead and delete that dimension. And now when we use the dimension icon, and I go ahead and place my dimension, it went back to decimal. Okay, so you see that now my dimensions, and this one still came out as inches, and I suspect I did one thing wrong. If you go back to the Manage tab and click on the Style Editor, and once again I do apologize for missing one little itty bitty step in this box, And it's because I did all the dimensions and I excluded one of them. So I really do have an idea of what I missed on this one. And once that dialog box appears, we're going to go back to the defaults, back to the object defaults. Let's go ahead and edit. And the one that I missed was the radial one. So there's a radial dimension one that was underneath the ordinate, and I actually stopped right before I got to that. Let's go ahead and change that one to the default millimeters. And now it should read that dimension when I create that one. Go ahead and save and close. And you can see that that one did update now. Okay, let's go ahead and put our other radial dimension on, which is this one. And remember that this one was created with a decimal. Let's go back to the Annotate tab, Dimension, select your dimension, and you can see that now it does give me that one. If I pull out just a little bit further away from it, I can get the standard leader way of doing it. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put my diameter dimensions on my circles. So I can either dimension each of these, which I do have enough room, or if you wanted to, you can put it on here 2 places or 2 times. And the way that you would do that is you would have to get out of the command. Remember, double click the dimension, and you're going to have to wait for the dialog box to appear. Underneath text, this first thing in these brackets is the actual text. So if I put a space behind it and I tell it 2 and type in places, you're going to see that it will appear after my text. So this is another way that you can do this, or you can dimension both of them. Go ahead and select OK. And then I'll go ahead and add one more dimension on this one, which is going to be a dimension from here going over to this edge. So let's go ahead and go to dimension from the center to this edge. And it's giving me a dimension of 80. Now I may come back and remove this one because I see that I have a chamfered dimension that's pulling that one. So I'll keep it for now, and I'll come back and delete it later if I need to. Here along the top one, let's go ahead and do a dimension from the center line to this edge. You'll notice that gives me 30. Then I'll do a dimension from that edge. I'm just picking the whole entire line, and you can see when I rotate my cursor, it will come down and it will align correctly. And another thing, since I'm here, what I'll do is go ahead and put my dimension from this edge to that edge. So let's dimension from that line to this one. And you'll see that I do have a 50. And I'll dimension from this edge to that edge. And this is 15. And I'll go ahead and put the one more dimension that goes to here. So from this edge to that end point, and there's my 25. Now some of these dimensions you're going to overlap them, and what I suggest you do is come back and delete them later. For example, that now I see that in this view I do have that width that I want, so I don't need it on this one. So remember, you can come back and delete it off of that one. And once again, I have this 81, and you can see these dimensions are redundant. So it's not a good idea to have redundant dimensions on it unless you make one of them as a reference. So I'll do that here for the bottom one. You can see that this one is 30 and 50. If I double click on this dimension, and one of the precisions and tolerancing, one of my options I have is just to select it and make it reference, and then select OK. So it'll go ahead and put the parentheses around it for you. Okay, another thing I need is the thickness between here and here. So I'll go back to dimension, select this edge and this edge, and that'll give me the thickness. Also on this view, I'll have the overall. So from here to that edge, that gives me another 50. Once again, this is the same dimension as here. So you can decide if you want to keep one or which one looks better. And in my case, I think that this one looks better here. So therefore, I'll delete that dimension on here. Okay, and I think that's about all the dimensions that we have. to fully construct this. All right. And you'll see that the rest of your title block, remember that you can go ahead and fill that in. And that's going to be located here where it says fill text. If you double click the icon, it's going to bring open the dialog box and you can go ahead and fill that information in. Okay. And another thing, if you want to go ahead and shade this, remember we can always double click on the dimensions. I'm sorry, on the view. And then we can select the shaded option and hit OK. And then whatever material that I assign to it should show up that way. Okay? I want to thank you for watching this video, and hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will definitely see you in the next one.